Section 21, Assistive Animals, Today's Fair Housing Rules and Regulations, 2026 Standard. Introduction. When no pets, policies meet federal law. As we move forward from Section 20, where we discussed federally funded housing and the additional compliance layers under Section 504 and Section 109, we now transition into one of the most misunderstood and frequently violated areas of fair housing law, assistive animals. This section ties directly back to our discussions on disability, Section 10, reasonable accommodations, Section 11, and legal hotline scenarios, Sections 8, 12, and 17. In 2026, one of the biggest mistakes housing providers and agents still make is treating assistive animals like pets, and that's where violations begin, because under fair housing law, assistive animals are not pets. They are a legal accommodation tied to a disability. What is an assistive animal? Redefining the concept. Let's start with the foundation. An assistance animal, also referred to as a service animal, emotional support animal, or therapy animal, is an animal that works, provides assistance, performs tasks, or offers emotional support to a person with a disability. These animals help alleviate one or more symptoms or effects of that disability. This means the role of the animal is not companionship, it is function and support. Real-world examples include guiding individuals who are blind, alerting individuals to seizures or medical events, assisting with mobility or balance, providing emotional support for anxiety, PTSD, or depression. And here's a key point in 2026. While dogs are most common, assistive animals are not limited to dogs. The most important rule: they are not pets. This is where most violations happen. Housing providers often say, "We have a no-pet policy." But fair housing law requires that policies, including pet restrictions, must be modified when necessary to accommodate a person with a disability. This means assistive animals must be allowed as a reasonable accommodation, even in properties that prohibit pets. This ties directly back to earlier sections. Policies must adapt when they conflict with protected rights. Training and certification, what is not required. Another major misconception in 2026 is the belief that assistive animals must be certified or professionally trained. Under the Fair Housing Act and Arizona Fair Housing Act, there is no requirement for certification, there is no requirement for formal training. Some animals are trained, but others provide support naturally, such as detecting anxiety or emotional distress. 2026 Compliance Rule. If you are asking for papers, certifications, or registrations, you may already be crossing the line. Who is protected? Expanding the scope. Assistive animal protections apply to individuals with disabilities, which are broadly defined as physical or mental impairments that substantially limit one or more major life activities. This includes conditions such as blindness or deafness, mobility impairments, PTSD or anxiety disorders, depression, epilepsy, HIV/AIDS, and importantly, protections extend to tenants, prospective tenants, homeowners, individuals associated with someone with a disability. This connects directly back to Section 19, Protected Classes Drive Compliance. Reasonable accommodation, the legal requirement. Under fair housing laws, housing providers must allow assistive animals as a reasonable accommodation when needed for a disability. This means no pet policies must be waived. Breed restrictions generally cannot be applied. Additional fees or deposits cannot be charged. Let's bring this into a real-world example. A tenant applies for a rental with an emotional support animal. The property has a strict no-pet policy and charges a $300 pet deposit. The correct response? Allow the animal and waive the deposit. Because again, this is not a pet. What housing is covered? Broad application. The Fair Housing Act applies to most types of housing, including apartments, condominiums, public housing, mobile home parks, assisted living facilities, group homes, and shelters. There are limited exemptions, but as we've discussed in earlier sections, those exemptions rarely apply when a licensee is involved, especially in advertising and professional conduct. What you can and cannot ask this is where agents and landlords must be very careful. You may ask whether the person has a disability, if not obvious. Whether the animal is needed for that disability, you may not ask. For detailed medical records, for proof of diagnosis, for unnecessary or intrusive documentation. This ties directly into our legal hotline scenarios. Overreaching is one of the most common violations. Real-world case, when policies go too far. Let's look at a real enforcement example. A housing provider implemented a complex and burdensome policy requiring multiple forms, breed restrictions, annual renewals, medical records. The result? The Department of Justice found that the policy discouraged and prevented individuals with disabilities from obtaining reasonable accommodations. The case resulted in civil penalties up to $50,000, hundreds of thousands in damages to affected individuals. 2026. Lesson: overcomplicating the process can be just as illegal as denying the request. The pattern: where violations happen. At this point, you should see the pattern clearly. Violations occur when assistive animals are treated like pets, fees or deposits are charged, documentation requirements are excessive, policies are rigid and inflexible. Compliance occurs when reasonable accommodations are granted, requests are handled simply and fairly, the focus remains on equal access, bringing it all together, the 2026 standard. In today's real estate environment, assistive animal compliance is not optional, it is expected. As a professional, your role is to recognize assistive animal requests, understand your legal obligations, educate clients and landlords, avoid unnecessary barriers. Because in 2026, the difference between a smooth transaction and a fair housing complaint often comes down to how you handle one simple request. Can I have my animal with me? Online discussion. Question. 1. Why are assistive animals not considered pets under fair housing law? Answer: because they provide support or perform tasks related to a disability and are considered a reasonable accommodation. Question 2. Can a landlord require certification for an assistive animal? Answer: no, fair housing laws do not require certification or formal training. Question 3. What is one common mistake housing providers make with assistive animals? Answer: charging pet deposits or applying pet policies to assistive animals.